My name is Diana Nolan, and for 38 consecutive years, I worked behind the primary lending desk of the Milford Community Credit Union in the quiet, historic heart of Massachusetts. I am 66 years old now, a widow who lives alone in a modest two-bedroom Cape Cod cottage on Birch Lane with a half-acre garden, 3 flourishing apple trees, and a 4-drawer steel filing cabinet sitting right next to my executive desk in my home office. When you spend nearly 4 decades reviewing personal tax returns, commercial balance sheets, credit history reports, and municipal property appraisals for 4,000 local families across New England, you develop a very specific, crystalline understanding of human nature. You learn with absolute certainty that people rarely reveal their true moral character during times of effortless financial surplus or easy abundance. Their true, unvarnished integrity is exposed precisely when the money runs dry, when a 30-year residential mortgage is due on the first of the month, or when the legal obligation to repay a debt collides with their personal entitlement. My late husband, Ray Nolan, was a master electrical contractor who worked 44 hours every week for 32 years with his heavy leather tool belt around his waist, pulling copper wiring through crawl spaces and industrial attics until his hands were calloused and scarred from the trade. Ray was a man of quiet unyielding integrity, who believed that a person's spoken word and their written signature on a contract were the two most sacred assets they carried through this world. When Ray passed away from a sudden coronary embolism during the bitter cold winter of 1995, he left behind a fully paid-off mortgage on our Birch Lane cottage, $240,000 in a conservative, FD-insured fixed certificate of deposit, and our 7-year-old son, Tyler. For 27 years after Ray's funeral, I raised Tyler entirely by myself, waking up at 5:15 every morning to pack his school lunches, attending every single one of his parent-teacher conferences during my short branch lunch hours, and spending my evenings sitting at our kitchen table with a yellow highlighter studying for my advanced corporate financial certifications, so I could earn the branch manager promotion that would guarantee his college education without a single penny of student loan debt. Tyler is 34 years old now, and on the surface, he has achieved the exact corporate professional success that Ray and I sacrificed our youth to construct underneath his feet. He holds a senior account director position at a prestigious high-profile brand communications agency in downtown Boston, earning a 6-figure salary that allows him to drive a leased German luxury sedan and wear Italian charcoal wool blazers to work every morning. 3 years ago, Tyler married Kendra Hale, a 29-year-old brand strategy coordinator at his firm whose entire life is curated around aesthetic perfection, social validation, and upward class mobility. Kendra is a woman who treats every social gathering, family dinner, and holiday cookout as a calculated public relations campaign designed to showcase her lifestyle to her 4,000 online followers. From the very first week of their engagement, she made it abundantly clear through hundreds of subtle, patronizing comments that a working-class credit union branch manager who lives in a sensible Cape Cod cottage and still drives an 8-year-old Subaru Outback does not naturally fit inside the polished country club social narrative she has meticulously engineered for her husband. But the most complex, volatile variable in our family dynamics was never Kendra's condescending attitude toward my sensible wardrobe. It was the hidden foundational financial architecture that secretly held up her own mother's world. Kendra's mother, Vivian Hale, is a 57-year-old woman who works 25 hours a week as a floor manager at a high-end women's boutique in downtown Westford, earning $18,200 a year. On the surface, Vivian presents herself to the community as a wealthy, independent self-made property owner who hosts catered monthly book clubs and afternoon garden parties inside her pristine, 3-bedroom ranch house on Cedar Street. She wears vintage Chanel scarves, drinks imported Italian Pinot Grigio, and constantly reminds her social circle that she purchased her home right after her divorce through her own business acumen. What Vivian Hale has spent nearly 3 consecutive years frantically pretending she forgot, and what Kendra has deliberately ignored, is that Vivian's name alone on page 4 of her property deed has never once possessed the mathematical power to hold up those drywall ceilings. That 3-bedroom ranch house on Cedar Street carries an active primary mortgage obligation of exactly $141,240 with the Master Servicing Division of the Milford Community Credit Union. For 9 years and 6 months, across 114 consecutive billing cycles, the automated underwriting system has verified just one primary collateral signature on page 4 of document number MC884-2017. My own full legal name, Diana J. Nolan, backed by my unblemished 802 personal credit score. Without my signature sitting on that legal deed, Vivian Hale's mortgage application would have been tossed into the bank's rejection bin in under 5 minutes. And her polished Westford lifestyle would never have existed outside a rented 1-bedroom apartment off the interstate highway. To fully grasp the sheer, breathtaking audacity of what transpired inside Vivian Hale's dining room on Easter Sunday, you must turn back the clock 9 years and 6 months to the rainy autumn evening of October 24, 2017. At that time, I was 57 years old, and in the peak executive stride of my 38th year as the senior branch manager at the Milford Community Credit Union. It was a Thursday evening, and I was sitting at my Birch Lane kitchen island at 9:30 at night, auditing a complex set of municipal bond ledgers for our weekly executive committee meeting, when my telephone rang on the Formica countertop. It was Tyler, who was 25 years old then, completing his second year as a junior account coordinator at the downtown Boston agency, and had been dating Kendra Hale for exactly 8 months. When I answered the receiver, Tyler's voice was tight, rapid, and trembling with a desperate, uncharacteristic panic that immediately set every maternal instinct in my chest on high alert. "Mom, I need your help right now. I really need you to come down to the credit union branch first thing tomorrow morning and speak to your underwriting team," Tyler stammered across the cellular connection, his words tumbling over one another in frantic succession. "Kendra is crying hysterically in her bedroom right now because her mother's residential loan application on that Cedar Street house just got formally rejected by the loan officer. Vivian finalized her divorce from Richard 3 months ago, and they sold their old Westford Colonial to split the equity, but Richard left her with $12,000 in unpaid revolving credit card balances and a disputed municipal tax lien that tanked her personal credit score down to 580. Every single commercial bank in the county has turned her down flat. The closing date on the Cedar Street property is set for next Friday, and if Vivian can't secure a qualified primary co-signer with an 800 credit profile by tomorrow afternoon, she's going to lose her earnest money deposit and end up living in a tiny rental apartment off the interstate highway. Kendra is completely beside herself, Mom. Please, if you don't help us, our entire relationship is going to fall apart under the stress." I sat motionless on my kitchen stool, holding the telephone receiver to my ear, while the rain drummed steadily against my window pane. 38 years of evaluating residential loan portfolios had taught me that co-signing a 30-year mortgage for a 580 credit score borrower undergoing a high-conflict divorce is one of the most hazardous financial liabilities any individual can assume. When you sign page 4 as a primary co-signer, you do not simply provide a character reference or a temporary character bridge. Under federal banking law, you assume 100% joint and several legal liability for the entire principal balance, every dollar of accruing interest, and every property tax assessment for the next 30 years. If that borrower misses a single monthly payment by even 15 days, your own personal credit rating takes an immediate, catastrophic drop, and the lending institution holds the absolute legal right to seize your bank accounts, place a lien against your own home, or garnish your retirement pension to recover their capital. I tried gently to explain these unyielding realities to my 25-year-old son across the telephone line. "Tyler, listen to my voice as a branch manager and as your mother," I said carefully. "A credit score of 580 alongside an $18,000 annual boutique wage, is not a minor paperwork technicality. It is a clear mathematical warning from the underwriting system that Vivian Hale does not currently possess the verified income or debt-to-income ratio required to service a $185,000 mortgage obligation. If I attach my personal 802 credit profile to her deed tomorrow morning, I am placing 40 years of Ray's copper wire legacy and my own retirement security directly onto her boutique paycheck. But Tyler did not want to hear financial logic or regulatory reality. He wept over the receiver, begging me for 45 minutes, promising on his father's memory that Vivian was a woman of absolute honor who just needed one single break after a devastating divorce, and swearing that he and Kendra would personally monitor every single payment until the loan was refinanced. It was that maternal weakness, that deep instinctive desire to shield my only son from heartbreak and provide a stable foundation for his future marriage, that finally overrode my 38 years of professional training. At 8:30 on Friday morning, October 28, 2017, I walked into the primary underwriting department of my own credit union branch, carrying Vivian Hale's rejected file. I sat down across from our chief lending officer, pulled out page 4 of document number MC884-2017, and right beside Vivian R. Hale's 580 signature line in box 4A, I signed my full name, Diana J. Nolan. In box 4B, our underwriter entered my verified personal credit score, 802. Because of my pristine rating, my 40-year banking tenure, and my unblemished repayment history on my own Birch Lane property, the automated lending system overrode Vivian's rejection in 3 seconds, issuing a formal approval for a $185,000 mortgage at a preferential, co-signed fixed interest rate of 3.8%. But my financial intervention on that autumn morning did not end with my signature on page 4 of the mortgage agreement. When an individual who has suffered deep status loss during a divorce is suddenly rescued by another person's quiet generosity, their psychological trajectory across the subsequent years almost always follows one of two paths: profound, lifelong gratitude and humility, or a slow, defensive revision of history designed to erase their dependence on the benefactor. Across the 3 years immediately following the Cedar Street closing, between 2018 and 2020, Vivian Hale chose the second path with a systematic, breathtaking efficiency. As the housing market in Westford appreciated, and her 3-bedroom ranch house gained aesthetic curb appeal through her garden projects, Vivian began suffering from what seasoned banking professionals call collateral amnesia. She simply erased the memory of that rainy Thursday night, when her 580 credit score was rejected across the county, replacing it with an elaborate, self-flattering narrative of female self-reliance and shrewd property investment. By the spring of 2020, when Tyler received his promotion to senior account director at the Boston agency and Kendra officially became his fiancée, Vivian Hale had completely rewritten the history of the Cedar Street mortgage. During her catered monthly book club meetings and backyard summer wine tastings, where she invited Kendra's agency friends and local Westford socialites, Vivian would stand on her hardwood patio with a glass of Pinot Grigio in her hand and deliver her favorite monologue. After Richard left me, I knew I had to take absolute control of my own financial destiny, she would tell her admiring guests with serene confidence. I went right down to the bank, put my boutique management credentials on the table, negotiated a prime 3.8% fixed interest rate entirely on my own merits, and bought this Cedar Street property without a single dollar of help from any man or family member. That is what a strong, self-reliant woman does when the world tries to push her down. Whenever I was present at those backyard gatherings, sitting quietly in a folding chair near the garden hose with a glass of iced tea, Vivian never once corrected her monologue or acknowledged my presence as the master guarantor, whose 802 credit rating had actually forced the automated underwriting system to override her rejection. Instead, Kendra and Vivian began actively orchestrating my social minimization across every family gathering. They established an unspoken, rigid caste system within our extended family, the Westford Creative Class, which consisted of Kendra, Tyler, Vivian, and their agency colleagues who worked in digital marketing and brand strategy, and the Milford Working Class, which consisted of myself, my late husband Ray's Copperwire legacy, and my 68-year-old paralegal friend Margot Peters, whom Kendra dismissed as rustic, provincial citizens who lacked the sophisticated vocabulary required for modern aesthetic hospitality. This systematic social exclusion reached its first, painful, unmistakable peak during my granddaughter Lily's second birthday party on a sunny Saturday afternoon in September of 2022. Kendra had planned an elaborate pastel-themed afternoon tea party inside the formal living room of Vivian's Cedar Street house, inviting 20 young mothers from her Boston agency and several local Westford socialites. 2 weeks prior to the event, Kendra sent me a formal digital invitation via email explicitly stating that the birthday celebration would commence at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I spent 3 evenings after my retirement branch shifts knitting Lily a soft, cream-colored wool sweater and baking 4 dozen homemade cinnamon apple tarts from my own Birch Lane orchard to bring as my contribution to the dessert table. When my Subaru Outback turned into Vivian's paved driveway at exactly 1:45 on that Saturday afternoon 15 minutes early, to help set up the tables, I discovered 20 leased luxury SUVs already parked along Cedar Street. I walked up the brick front walkway, carrying my basket of warm apple tarts, and opened the heavy oak front door, only to find the formal living room and dining area completely packed with 30 guests who had clearly been celebrating since noon. Kendra had sent me a deliberately falsified start time, shifting my arrival 2 full hours past the primary social hour, so that her agency colleagues and Westford friends could enjoy their catered salmon finger sandwiches and champagne mimosas without having to interact with Tyler's 66-year-old mother in her sensible, knit cardigan and walking shoes. When I stepped inside the foyer holding my warm apple tarts, Kendra did not apologize for the scheduling mix-up or invite me to join the circle of young mothers gathered around the mahogany dining table. She took my wicker basket from my hands, handed it to a hired caterer without a word of thanks, and smoothly guided me by my elbow down the short hallway toward the rear, narrow television den near the back garage door. "Diana, thank goodness you're here right now," Kendra whispered with a practiced, patronizing smile that did not touch her eyes. "The formal living room is so loud and crowded with the agency partners right now, and little Lily is getting completely overwhelmed by all the camera flashes." If the birthday party exclusion in September of 2022 was the quiet warning bell that our family structure was deteriorating, my Friday afternoon lunch with Tyler in mid-March of 2024 was the definitive, unsparing diagnostic X-ray that exposed the absolute moral rot inside my son's marriage. At 11 o'clock on a brisk, windy Friday morning, just 3 weeks before Easter Sunday, Tyler called my cellular phone and asked if I would drive down from Milford to meet him for a private, one-on-one lunch at a high-end upscale Italian restaurant located on Boylston Street in downtown Boston, right near his brand communications agency. He explicitly requested that I arrive at 12:30 sharp, stressing that he wanted to discuss some important, long-term family coordination issues without Kendra or Lily present, so we could speak with complete openness between mother and son. I spent an hour driving my 8-year-old Subaru Outback down the turnpike, paid $28 to park in a concrete underground garage, and walked into the dimly lit white tablecloth Italian dining room where single entrees of sea bass and truffled risotto carried $48 price tags. Tyler was already seated at a quiet corner table near the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking impeccably tailored in a double-breasted charcoal Italian wool blazer, a crisp blue Oxford dress shirt, and a gold chronograph watch that Kendra had purchased for his 34th birthday. As I sat down across from him, placing my practical leather purse on the empty chair beside me, Tyler ordered 2 $12 bowls of baby arugula salad and 2 sparkling mineral waters without consulting the menu or asking if I preferred a warm bowl of soup after walking 3 blocks in the March wind. We spent our first 15 minutes engaging in stiff, superficial small talk about the regional spring weather patterns and his agency's upcoming brand campaign for a major regional footwear company. But the moment the waiter placed our arugula salads down on the linen tablecloth and retreated toward the kitchen, Tyler set his silver fork across the rim of his plate, leaned forward over his mineral water, and adopted the exact, practiced, patronizing vocal register of an agency HR director, delivering a formal performance improvement plan to an underperforming corporate employee. Mom, Kendra and I have spent the last 3 weeks having some very serious, objective conversations about where our family is heading as Lily gets older. Tyler began, his eyes focused just past my left ear rather than meeting my gaze directly across the table. As my career continues to expand, and we start hosting more executive partners and senior brand directors at Mom Vivian's house on Cedar Street, Kendra feels very strongly that we need to establish some consistent elevated social standards across our entire extended family circle. I took a slow sip of my sparkling water, set the heavy crystal glass down right on the center of my napkin, and looked straight into my son's hazel eyes with the calm, analytical discipline of a branch manager conducting a regulatory audit. And what specific elevated social standards does Kendra believe your 66-year-old mother is failing to meet across our family circle? Tyler? I asked quietly, my voice carrying zero defensive tremor. Tyler flushed slightly around his shirt collar, shifting his posture in his tailored blazer before plunging headlong into his wife's rehearsed bullet points. Well, Mom, to be completely frank, Kendra feels that your general social presentation and conversational habits at family dinners come across as a bit common and working class for the circle we're operating in now, Tyler said, his words dropping like cold lead weights onto our linen tablecloth. For example, whenever Kendra's agency friends ask about your background at dinner parties, you always launch into long stories about Dad working 30 years as a master electrician pulling copper wire, or how you used to balance municipal vault cash down at the local credit union. Kendra feels those stories are overly provincial and make our guests feel uncomfortable. Furthermore, Mom, Kendra feels that your aesthetic choices when you visit Westford, like wearing those sensible wool cardigans, carrying that old leather branch manager purse, and parking your 8-year-old Subaru Outback right out on the front curb, where all our neighbors can see it clash directly with the sophisticated, modern image Vivian has worked so hard to build around her property. We would really appreciate it if, going forward, you could make a small, personal effort to upgrade your wardrobe before coming to holiday gatherings. Perhaps park your car down the street around the corner when you visit Cedar Street, and try to focus your dinner conversations on neutral, elevated topics like travel, literature, or garden aesthetics rather than your old banking days or Dad's electrical union. I sat perfectly motionless across that white linen tablecloth for 6 full seconds, listening to the gentle clinking of silverware echoing across the upscale dining room, while the full, horrifying scope of my son's words settled into my soul. The boy whose diapers I had changed at 3 in the morning, while Ray worked overtime at the power plant. The boy whose $600 high school calculus textbooks I had purchased by skipping my own dental checkups. The boy whose very mother-in-law slept peacefully every single night, inside a house guaranteed against foreclosure by my 38 years of hard-earned credit. That exact boy sat across a $48 salad table and asked me to hide my car around the corner so his wife wouldn't be embarrassed by my Subaru Outback. Easter Sunday arrived on the second weekend of April, falling on a crisp, brilliantly clear spring afternoon where the temperature hovered right at 62 degrees across Middlesex County. At exactly 12 o'clock noon, I stood in my Birch Lane kitchen, dressed in my conservative, dark navy blue silk blouse, my charcoal wool trousers, and my polished leather walking shoes, the exact same dignified, professional attire I had worn for 20 years when conducting board meetings at the credit union branch. Resting on my Formica kitchen island sat a heavy, rectangular Pyrex baking dish containing 12 pounds of homemade scalloped potatoes, which I had spent 3 hours slicing on a French mandoline and layering with aged Gruyere cheese. fresh cream, garlic, and thyme from my garden. I wrapped the heavy glass dish carefully in 2 thick kitchen towels to preserve its warmth, carried it out to my Subaru Outback, placed it securely onto the passenger seat, and began the 70-mile drive east toward Westford and Cedar Street. When I turned my Subaru onto Cedar Street at 1:15 that afternoon, the residential block looked like a curated photograph from a New England architectural magazine. Vivian Hale's single-story ranch house sat squarely on its half-acre lot, gleaming beneath the spring sun with its brand-new, custom dark forest green louvered shutters and a freshly painted white front entryway. Along the brick front walkway leading up to the porch, 24 vibrant yellow and scarlet Dutch tulips were in full, magnificent bloom bulbs that Vivian had proudly boasted to her book club about importing directly from the Netherlands the previous autumn. As I pulled my Outback up along the front curb, deliberately parking right in front of her mailbox, where every single neighbor on Cedar Street could see my practical 8-year-old station wagon, I turned off the ignition, sat in the driver's seat for 60 seconds and looked at those tulips. I knew with exact professional certainty that every bulb in that soil, every stroke of paint on those shutters, and every brick in that walkway existed solely because my 802 credit rating sat on page 4 of document number MC 884-2017 inside the credit union vault 70 miles away. I carried my warm dish of scalloped potatoes up the brick pathway, rang the polished brass doorbell, and stepped inside the foyer into a house that was humming with the self-congratulatory chatter of 14 assembled guests. Vivian Hale had spared zero expense or effort in staging her domestic kingdom for the holiday gathering. Her mahogany dining table, which sat squarely in the center of the formal dining room, whose drywall my credit had underwritten, was extended to its full 14-foot length and set with her absolute finest bone china, a 60-piece English porcelain service that she frequently reminded her Westford friends she had purchased with her first real executive paycheck. What Vivian conveniently omitted from her holiday storytelling was that her first real executive paycheck was, in concrete reality, the $600 monthly bookkeeping check issued by Harold Briggs, the 78-year-old retired contractor, whose business account I had personally managed, and whose door I had unlocked for her with my 3-page recommendation letter. The holiday menu was elaborate, fragrant, and meticulously arranged. A 15-pound brown sugar-glazed bone-in ham sat on a heavy silver platter at the center of the table, 2 large crystal bowls of buttered asparagus with lemon zest and toasted almonds, warm artisan dinner rolls served in linen-lined baskets, and my dish of scalloped potatoes placed near the foot of the table. The seating arrangement around that gleaming mahogany surface had been choreographed by Kendra Hale with the exact, unyielding precision of a diplomatic protocol officer enforcing strict social hierarchy. Tyler and Kendra sat side by side at the far, dominant head of the table facing the living room windows, flanked by Vivian Hale and Kendra's brother Marcus on their right and left. Meanwhile, I was guided by Kendra's manicured hand straight toward the near, subordinate end of the table near the swinging kitchen door, where my designated metal folding chair was squeezed tightly between Marcus's quiet, 22-year-old college girlfriend and a female Westford acquaintance of Vivian's whom nobody bothered to introduce to me by name across the entire 2-hour meal. Throughout our first course, as we carved the first tiers of the glazed ham and passed the warm dinner rolls, the conversation around that 14-foot table flowed smoothly around me without ever once including me. Vivian discussed her upcoming summer vacation rental on the Rhode Island coast with her Westford acquaintance, while Kendra and Tyler debated the optimal color palettes and marble countertop selections for their upcoming kitchen remodel downtown. Whenever I attempted to offer a polite observation about the unusually warm spring weather or ask Marcus about his recent college semester exams, my sentence was met with brief, single-word nods before the conversational current swiftly swept back toward the Boston agency world, country club golf tournaments, and interior design trends. I sat quietly in my folding chair, between the third cousin and the potted fern, eating my scalloped potatoes with my silver fork, and observing the room with the emotionless, diagnostic clarity of a senior auditor examining a company that is about to enter involuntary liquidation. I observed Vivian Hale taking slow, self-satisfied sips of her imported Pinot Grigio, looking up at the crystal chandelier above our heads, with the serene composure of a monarch whose territorial annexation had just been ratified by treaty. We were exactly 40 minutes into our Easter main course, halfway through carving the second tier of the glazed ham and passing the lemon asparagus, when Kendra suddenly pushed her chair back from the mahogany table and stood up. She picked up her silver butter knife and tapped the rim of her crystal water glass 3 times, producing a sharp, resonant ping that instantly cut through the ambient chatter and brought the 14-person dining room to an absolute anticipatory hush. Kendra smoothed the front of her pastel pink silk blouse, squared her shoulders, placed one manicured hand affectionately onto Vivian Hale's shoulder right beside her, and looked around the assembled table with the serene, practiced confidence of a corporate communications director about to unveil a major corporate acquisition to a board of shareholders. "Thank you all so much for coming together to celebrate family with us today," Kendra began, her voice ringing out clear, articulate, and deliberately projected so that every single guest from head to foot could absorb her words without strain. As Tyler and I look around this dining room, seeing 3 generations sitting together under one roof, we've realized how incredibly important it is to establish permanent traditions that reflect where our family is heading as we build our future. Kendra paused dramatically, looking straight down the 14-foot length of the mahogany table, directly into my eyes, where I sat squeezed right between Marcus's 22-year-old college girlfriend and the swinging kitchen door. "We have decided that from now on, all of our major family holiday gatherings, Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, and summer kickoff barbecues will be hosted permanently and exclusively right here at my mother's house on Cedar Street," Kendra announced, her smile wide, radiant, and utterly devoid of genuine warmth. "Mom's ranch house has the open floor plan, the modern chef's kitchen, the formal dining setup, and the beautiful garden space that makes hosting large groups so effortless and comfortable for everyone involved. It just makes complete logical sense to centralize our holidays in a home that truly accommodates our growing family dynamic." Then came the sentence that had clearly been rehearsed in front of a mirror, the casual, chilling footnote designed to formally demote me from a matriarch into a conditional applicant for family inclusion. "Of course, Diana, you can come if there's room around the table once we finalize our primary RSVP sess every season." "You can come if there's room." She did not utter the sentence with overt anger, malice, or raised vocal inflection. Open hostility would have been infinitely easier to confront across a dinner table, because anger reveals fear and weakness. Kendra spoke those 6 words with the smooth administrative detachment of a corporate HR manager explaining parking permit relocations to a retiring contractor. My attendance at future family Christmases and Thanksgivings was no longer a maternal right or an expected kinship. It was a scheduling variable, a logistical footnote to be evaluated on a seasonal basis, depending on how many of Vivian's book club friends or Kendra's agency colleagues confirmed their attendance first. If the math worked out, if Table 1 and Table 2 had an empty folding chair near the kitchen door, Diana Nolan would be granted a seat. If the RSVP sess exceeded the mahogany table's capacity, the woman who had spent 38 years underwriting the town of Milford would be quietly left off the email thread to eat soup alone on Birch Lane. The silence that settled over that dining room after Kendra lowered her silver butter knife was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. Nobody chuckled, nobody reached for the breadbasket, or offered a polite transition topic to diffuse the tension. Across the table, Marcus's young girlfriend stared intently at her linen napkin, while Vivian Hale took a slow, self-satisfied sip of her imported Pinot Grigio, looking up at the crystal chandelier with the serene composure of a monarch whose territorial annexation had just been ratified by treaty. Slowly, deliberately, I shifted my gaze from Kendra's smiling face down to my 34-year-old son, Tyler. Tyler sat rigidly in his high-backed chair, right next to his wife, his shoulders slightly hunched beneath his tailored Italian blazer. His eyes locked downward with unblinking, laser-like intensity upon his porcelain plate of scalloped potatoes. He did not look up, he did not turn his head 3 degrees to the left or right. He studied those sliced layers of Gruyere cheese and baked thyme, as though if he stared hard enough and long enough, the potatoes would open up and swallow the entire dining room, relieving him of the moral necessity of choosing between the woman who curated his social standing and the mother who had paid for his childhood shoes. I sat motionless in my folding chair for 4 full seconds, engaged my analytical discipline, carefully set my silver fork and knife down, across the rim of my porcelain plate, aligned them parallel precisely as my mother had taught me 50 years earlier, picked up my linen napkin, dabbed the corners of my mouth, folded the cloth into a neat square, and placed it to the left of my water glass. I looked down the 14-foot mahogany table at Kendra Hale, offered a serene, razor-thin smile that did not engage the muscles around my eyes, and spoke in the calm, measured conversational register I used when approving commercial credit limits. "That sounds like a lovely, very practical arrangement, Kendra," I said clearly, ensuring my voice carried zero tremor or hesitation. When I turned my Subaru into my narrow gravel driveway on Birch Lane at 5:15 that Easter evening, I pushed the transmission lever into park, turned the ignition key to silence the engine, clicked off the headlights, and took my hands off the steering wheel. I sat in the absolute, enveloping quiet of my car interior, staring straight through the windshield at the closed white wooden door of my detached garage, watching the glowing green digital numerals of the dashboard clock tick forward. 7 minutes. I sat motionless in the gathering twilight for exactly 7 minutes, counting the 60-second intervals with the analytical detachment of an auditor, balancing an account that refuses to reconcile. Across those 7 minutes, the numbness that had shielded me during the 25-minute drive from Cedar Street evaporated, replaced by a profound, icy, unshakable clarity, the specific terrifying calmness that settles over a seasoned lending officer when she realizes that a long-term corporate borrower has committed systematic loan fraud, and the time for gentle remediation has permanently expired. At the exact stroke of the 7th minute, I reached into my leather purse, pulled out my mobile phone, scrolled past my son's contact profile, and dialed the direct cellular number of Margot Peters. Margot Peters was 68 years old, a 5'4" retired senior commercial litigation paralegal who had worked for 30 years at the most aggressive real estate and corporate law firm in Milford before retiring 2 years after I did. Margot and I had forged our unshakable bond nearly 3 decades prior when she walked into my credit union branch every Friday afternoon to file complex municipal lien releases for her firm's high-net-worth clients. We were both sharp, meticulous women who respected precision above politeness, and our friendship had deepened into absolute, unspoken sisterhood during the dark winter of 1995 when Margot's husband, David, passed away just 2 months after Ray died in hospice. For nearly 30 years, Margot had been my sounding board, my reality check, and the only human being in Milford who understood the exact, suffocating weight of raising a fatherless son while working 50 hours a week behind a desk. Exactly 22 minutes after I called her, Margot's silver sedan pulled into my gravel driveway behind my Subaru. She stepped out onto the porch carrying 2 distinct items that had defined our crisis management protocols since 1995. A heavy bottle of full-bodied California Cabernet Sauvignon held firmly in her left hand, and a thick, yellow 80-page legal writing pad with 2 sharpened No. 2 pencils tucked under her right arm. We walked straight out to my covered rear wooden porch, overlooking the dark backyard garden beds, sat down in 2 Adirondack chairs, and poured 2 generous glasses of red wine into crystal goblets. Through the open window of my office just 4 feet behind where we sat, the dark outline of my 4-drawer steel filing cabinet was clearly visible against the interior wall. Margot flipped her yellow legal pad open to a clean-lined page, and looked across the porch at me with sharp, intelligent brown eyes. "Let's strip the emotion away from this immediately, Diana," Margot said, tapping her number 2 pencil against the yellow paper. Kendra Hale is a 29-year-old marketing coordinator who has spent 3 years constructing a social stage where her mother plays the queen and you play the rustic peasant from the highway diner. What she doesn't know, what Vivian Hale has spent 9 years frantically pretending she forgot, is that the physical stage they are standing on does not belong to them. How many years exactly has Vivian Hale been living inside that Cedar Street house, under your primary credit underwriting? 9 years and 6 months this April, I replied quietly, looking over my shoulder through the open window at the silhouette of the filing cabinet. I signed page 4 of her master mortgage agreement on October 28, 2017. Her credit score on that morning was 580, mine was 802. The original principal balance was $185,000 at 3.8% fixed interest. I checked my online banking portal 3 days ago. The current outstanding principal balance sitting on that loan is exactly $141,240. Margot wrote 3 lines of numbers across her yellow pad with swift aggressive pencil strokes, underlined the figure 141,240 twice, and looked up at me with an expression of formidable, professional resolve. "I am not going to tell you to go to family therapy, Diana," Margot declared softly. "I have just one simple administrative question for you tonight. What do you realistically want to do with the legal integrity of your own name?" After Margot packed up her yellow legal pad and drove home at 10:30 that evening, I walked inside my cottage, turned on the overhead fluorescent lamp in my home office, took my brass filing cabinet key from my desk drawer, and unlocked the heavy 4-drawer steel cabinet sitting beneath my window. I slid the second drawer out on its well-oiled tracks, reached past my auto insurance folders, and pulled out the manila folder with the bright green index tab, Vivian Hale Mortgage Co-Signer Agreement 2017. At 9 o'clock on Monday morning, I walked into the second-floor downtown law offices of Helen Park, a brilliant 65-year-old former banking and estate litigation attorney, placed my green-tabbed manila folder across her polished desk, and explained my exact legal objective. My formal administrative restructuring was only 50% complete when I walked out of Helen Park's law office on Monday afternoon. Before I drove my Subaru back to Birch Lane, I sat in the driver's seat parked along Main Street, pulled my mobile phone from my purse, and dialed the direct number of Harold Briggs. Harold answered on the third ring over the rumbling engine noise of his Buick as he drove between 2 of his Westford rental properties. "Diana Nolan," his gravelly, cheerful voice boomed across the line. "To what do I owe the absolute pleasure of hearing from my favorite credit union manager on a Monday afternoon?" "Harold, I'm calling you today about a personal administrative matter regarding the bookkeeping arrangement we set up between you and Vivian Hale 9 years ago," I said clearly and directly, avoiding any emotional dramatization or gossip about the Cedar Street Easter dinner. "Due to evolving personal circumstances within our extended family, I am formally stepping back from my professional recommendation and referral regarding Vivian Hale's employment. Going forward, I need you to evaluate her ongoing bookkeeping position strictly on her own merits as an independent contractor, without any personal consideration, favor, or loyalty attached to my name or my previous banking relationship with your business." Harold Briggs did not ask a single prying question about my relationship with Tyler, Kendra, or Vivian Hale, a 78-year-old master contractor who has survived 40 years in the construction industry, understands the unspoken codes of human character and business boundaries better than anyone. He was silent over the rumbling engine of his Buick for 5 full seconds before offering his response in a low, definitive tone that carried the unshakable weight of old New England honor. "Diana, listen to me right now," Harold said slowly. "In my world, when a seasoned professional like you puts their name on a letterhead and vouches for someone, you stay vouched for as long as that bridge stands strong. If the woman who built the bridge is stepping back from the foundation today, I don't need to ask why the river changed course. I hired her because I trusted Diana Nolan's word. If your word is no longer anchoring her desk in my office, I will handle the administrative transition cleanly, fairly, and professionally before the 1st of next month. True to his unyielding word, within 28 days of our telephone conversation, Harold Briggs formally transitioned Vivian Hale out of his bookkeeping system, closed off the $600 monthly cash income stream, and hired a certified public accounting firm in Westford to manage his rental ledgers electronically. Exactly 2 weeks after Helen Park dispatched our certified legal filing, the formal loan fray assessment letter printed on the exact same cream-colored letterhead template that I had personally drafted during my tenure as branch manager arrived in the brass mailbox outside Vivian Hale's Cedar Street house on a Wednesday morning in early June. The single-spaced, formal credit union notice addressed to Miss Vivian R. Hale contained zero emotional fluff, zero personal apologies, and zero room for negotiation. Dear borrower, please be advised that the primary co-signer on residential mortgage account number MC884-2017, Diana J. Nolan, has submitted a formal legal request for release from all joint underwriting and liability obligations pursuant to Section 14B of your lending agreement, in accordance with federal and state banking regulations governing co-signer withdrawal. Our underwriting division has completed a mandatory independent financial reassessment of your individual creditworthiness, current documented income, and outstanding debt obligations as the primary title holder. When Vivian read down to the second paragraph, containing the objective underwriting calculations, the floor beneath her curated lifestyle completely gave way. Without my 802 credit rating, acting as a protective shield around her file, the credit union's risk assessment algorithms evaluated Vivian Hale entirely on her own independent financial profile. An individual credit score that had slowly crawled up to 640 across 9 years, against an $18,200 annual part-time boutique salary $14 a spore, 25 hours week, with zero supplemental bookkeeping income from Harold Briggs remaining on her ledger. The mathematical verdict was absolute. Vivian Hale's independent debt-to-income ratio exceeded 58%, far above the 43% statutory cap required to hold a $141,000 residential mortgage under standard prime lending guidelines. The third paragraph of the bank letter delivered the inevitable structural consequences. Because your individual financial profile does not satisfy prime lending criteria for the outstanding principal balance of $141.240, your mortgage account has been reclassified under our high-risk portfolio guidelines effective July 1st. Your preferential co-signed interest rate of 3.8% has been adjusted to the current market high-risk rate of 6.2%. Accordingly, your required monthly principal, interest, and escrow payment will increase from $1,200 per month to $1,850 per month. Please ensure that sufficient funds are deposited into your servicing account prior to the July 1st billing cycle to avoid delinquency proceedings. Do the unvarnished arithmetic that Vivian Hale stared at on her kitchen island that Wednesday morning. Her monthly mortgage payment surged by exactly $650 per month, $1,850 minus $200. Simultaneously, her $600 monthly bookkeeping income from Harold Briggs had completely vanished from her bank account just 3 weeks prior. Exactly 12 hours after I severed that telephone connection with Vivian Hale, at 7:15 on Friday morning, while I was standing at my Birch Lane kitchen island, pouring my first steaming cup of dark roast coffee from the glass pot, my mobile phone buzzed violently across the Formica countertop. The caller ID displayed, Kendra Hale Nolan. Before I could even say good morning, Kendra's voice exploded across the line tight, hyperventilating, and vibrating with the controlled, terrifying fury of a marketing director whose carefully constructed public brand has just experienced a catastrophic PR disaster. You did this to my mother on purpose, Diana. Kendra hissed across the cellular connection, her voice pitched half an octave above her normal conversational tone. You deliberately filed those legal withdrawal papers right after Easter dinner, just to punish her. You are financially abusing an elderly woman, over a simple, perfectly reasonable holiday boundary that Tyler and I set for our own emotional peace. I took a slow, leisurely sip of my dark roast coffee, feeling the warm liquid settle into my chest while Kendra caught her breath on the other end of the line. "Good morning, Kendra," I said pleasantly, my voice entirely devoid of defensive agitation. "I have not financially abused anyone, and I have not taken a single dollar from your mother's bank accounts. I simply exercised my statutory right under Section 14B of her lending agreement to remove my personal 802 credit rating from a primary co-signed mortgage that I have carried without compensation for 114 consecutive months." "Stop hiding behind your boring banking jargon, Diana," Kendra screamed, her professional veneer completely shattering over the phone. "My mother called me crying at midnight last night. She says her mortgage payment is jumping by nearly $700 a month on July 1st because you pulled your name off the deed, and that Harold Briggs fired her from her bookkeeping job because you told him to. You are actively trying to make her homeless just because I didn't save you a seat at the head of the Easter table. It is disgusting, vindictive, and pathetic." I set my coffee mug down onto the Formica countertop with a soft, deliberate click that echoed across the line. "Kendra, your mother's Cedar Street house has had my full legal name, my credit union underwriting guarantee, and my 802 credit score sitting on page 4 of its master deed for 9 years and 6 months. When she applied for that mortgage after her divorce, in October of 2017, her personal credit score was exactly 580. Every single commercial bank in this county rejected her application in under 5 minutes. My signature on page 4 was the sole legal instrument that transformed her rejection into a $185,000 home approval. Furthermore, that $600 monthly bookkeeping check she collected from Harold Briggs every Tuesday morning for 9 years did not exist because your mother is a master accountant. It existed solely because I wrote a 3-page recommendation letter on my embossed branch manager stationery and personally called Harold to vouch for her character when nobody else would hire her. I paused for 3 seconds, allowing the concrete numerical weight of 9 years of unearned financial subsidy to settle across the connection. "It was always my credit, Kendra," I said softly into the silence. "It was always my foundation holding up your mother's walls. You just never bothered to read the fine print, because you were too busy curating the guest list." I didn't wait for her to formulate a defensive marketing spin or stammer out an apology. I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red disconnect button, closing the digital file with permanent authority. That Friday evening at 7:45, while the spring sun was dropping below the tree line and casting long, dark shadows across my Birch Lane front yard, the crunch of tires on gravel sounded outside my living room window. I looked out through the sheer curtains and saw my son's leased German luxury sedan, parked right behind my 8-year-old Subaru Outback. Tyler stepped out of the driver's seat, closed the car door quietly, and walked slowly across the gravel driveway toward my covered wooden porch. For the very first time in nearly 4 years, he was not wearing his tailored Italian charcoal blazer, his crisp Oxford dress shirt, or his polished Italian loafers. He was wearing an old, faded gray cotton t-shirt, a pair of worn denim jeans, and scuffed white tennis shoes that looked as though he had dug them out of the bottom trunk of his high school closet before driving out from the city. He walked up the 3 wooden steps of my porch, his shoulders slumped and his head bowed, looking younger, smaller, and infinitely more exposed than the agency account director, who had lectured me over arugula at the downtown Italian restaurant 3 months prior. I opened my cottage front door before he could knock and stood right in the center of the wooden doorframe, keeping the screen door unlatched but holding my body squarely in the entry pathway. Right behind my left shoulder, screwed firmly into the oak door trim, where the morning light caught its brass surface, hung my navy blue woven lanyard with its gold lettering, "Diana Nolan, Branch Manager." Tyler stopped 2 feet away from me on the porch decking, looked up into my face, with bloodshot hazel eyes that carried deep dark circles beneath them, and let out a long, shuddering sigh. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" Tyler whispered, his voice cracking with genuine, bewildered exhaustion, as his eyes flickered past my shoulder toward the Navy lanyard hanging on its brass hook. While the working-class citizens of Milford quietly rallied around the integrity of my 38-year banking reputation, Kendra Hale spent the final 3 weeks of June frantically constructing an offensive counter-narrative designed to rescue her mother's social standing before their annual 4th of July family barbecue. On the final Saturday morning of June, my older sister, Janet, a 70-year-old retired high school English teacher who lives 2 towns over in Hopkinton and possesses an absolute intolerance for manipulative family drama, called my mobile phone while I was pruning my backyard rose bushes. "Diana, Kendra has invited 24 extended family members, including our cousins and 3 of Tyler's agency directors, to their backyard downtown for the 4th of July next weekend," Janet warned firmly. "She has spent the past 10 days telling everyone on her social media channels that you are an unstable, controlling mother-in-law who is financially abusing her elderly mother by illegally manipulating credit union documents to force Vivian out of her home just to punish Tyler for setting healthy marital boundaries. She is planning to execute a public, emotional ambush right before they serve the potato salad, intending to publicly shame and guilt-trip you into signing the loan reinstatement papers before the credit union initiates foreclosure proceedings next month." I stood quietly in the warm June sun for several seconds, looking through my home office window at the green-tabbed manila folder resting on my desk pad. "Well, Janet," I said softly, my tone settling into absolute, unshakable professional resolve, "if Kendra intends to conduct a public financial audit of our family ledger in front of 24 guests, I suppose I should make certain I bring the original underwriting documentation to the meeting." "Just bring the manila folder, Diana, just the folder." On the morning of the 4th of July, while the summer sun climbed high into a cloudless blue sky, and the temperature reached 82 degrees, I dressed with the meticulous, intentional precision of a branch manager preparing to deliver testimony before a federal banking regulatory commission. I put on my conservative navy blue linen blouse, the exact same silk blend blouse that Ray Nolan had complimented 30 years earlier, when I wore it to my assistant branch manager promotion dinner, stepped into my polished leather walking shoes, hooked my gold wedding band chain securely around my neck directly beneath my collar, walked into my home office, and picked up the thick manila folder from my desk. "Vivian Hale Mortgage Co-Signer Agreement 2017. Inside that folder sat 3 pristine certified documents protected inside clear plastic sleeves. The 30-page master mortgage contract, my 3-page embossed recommendation letter to Harold Briggs, and page 4 bearing Vivian Hale's 580 credit profile right beside my 802 profile in indelible blue ink. I slid the folder neatly into the side compartment of my leather tote bag, zipped the closure shut, picked up my keys, and drove out to Tyler and Kendra's suburban house. When my Subaru Outback turned into the paved driveway of Tyler and Kendra's suburban property at 1:30 that afternoon, the backyard lawn was already swarming with 24 assembled guests beneath the summer sun. 6 long folding tables covered in patriotic red and white checkered tablecloths were arranged across the grass, loaded with bowls of potato salad, grilled sweet corn, paper plates, and plastic cups filled with iced tea and lemonade. From the far corner of the patio, the thick gray smoke of charcoal lighter fluid drifted across the yard from a massive stainless steel grill where Tyler stood cooking hamburgers and hot dogs. My sister Janet and my paralegal friend Margot Peters had already arrived 15 minutes ahead of me. They stood side by side near the beverage cooler under the shade of a maple tree. When Janet saw me walk through the side wooden garden gate carrying my leather tote bag, she offered one single, sharp affirmative nod across the lawn, a silent New England signal that confirmed our solidarity without uttering a word. Kendra Hale stood near the double sliding glass doors of the patio, in a designer sundress and oversized sunglasses, chatting with 2 senior marketing directors from Tyler's agency, while Vivian Hale sat across the patio in a cushioned wicker lawn chair wearing dark sunglasses, having lost 15 pounds across 4 weeks of financial panic as she gripped a glass of iced tea with manicured fingers that trembled against the condensation. At exactly 2:45 in the afternoon, when the paper plates had been tossed into the trash bags hanging along the wooden fence, and the 24 guests were leaning back in their folding chairs, enjoying the lazy, post-meal summer warmth, Kendra Hale initiated her orchestrated performance. She walked to the center of the patio directly between the double-sliding glass doors, picked up a red plastic drinking cup in her left hand, tapped the rim 3 times with a metal salad fork to silence the 24 guests across the checkered tables, took off her designer sunglasses, and looked across the lawn with the grave, rehearsed solemnity of a corporate executive addressing a humanitarian crisis during a press conference. Thank you all so much for joining us on this beautiful 4th of July to celebrate family, independence, and the bonds that hold us together through difficult seasons, Kendra began, her voice projected clearly across the yard. As many of you know, over the past several weeks, our family has been subjected to a deeply painful, unprovoked campaign of financial manipulation and elder abuse that we feel obligated to address transparently right here today among the people who love us most. And whenever I look out across my quiet half-acre garden on Birch Lane, as the golden afternoon light filters through the leaves of my 3 apple trees, I am reminded of the deepest, most enduring financial truth that 38 years behind a credit union vault could ever teach a woman. True wealth is never measured by the square footage of a formal dining room, the brand name on a silk cardigan, or the number of RSVs around a mahogany table. True wealth is the absolute, unshakable peace of mind that comes when every single signature on your personal ledger belongs entirely to you, when your self-respect is not mortgaged to pay for another adult's social validation, and when the roof over your head rests solidly upon your own uncompromised integrity. Never let anyone treat your hard-earned financial foundation as an expendable stepping stone for their status.